Chapter 9, Batting 1,000. Ted Williams of the Boston Red Sox is the last major league player to bat 400. That means that he achieved a hit more than 4 out of every 10 times he got up to bat over the course of a baseball season. At just 23 years old, Ted Williams was batting .39955 heading into the baseball season's final day. The Red Sox were scheduled to play 2 games in Philadelphia against the Philadelphia Phillies. Legend has it that the Red Sox manager, Joe Cronin, gave Williams the option to sit out the 2 games to protect his official batting average of 400. But Williams didn't want to hit 400 with an average that needed to be rounded up. He ended up playing and hitting safely in 6 out of his 8 at-bats, finishing the season with an average of .406. He made history. So, just how difficult is it to bat 400? It hasn't been done in nearly 80 years. This all occurred back in 1941, and the achievement of batting 400 is still considered the standard of hitting excellence. Batting 400 over the course of a 162-game baseball season is an amazing accomplishment. But how about batting a perfect 1,000 over the course of 2,000 plus years? That's what we're talking about when we examine the reliability of the Bible. Takeaway number 3 is the Bible is the most studied and scrutinized text in history, and it's not even close. Put simply, if it could have been proven unreliable, it would have been by now. If there were a series of false statements or contradictions that could falsify the Bible, it would have been done by now. This is like having the best pitchers in the world spend their lifetimes trying to strike you out and not being able to do it ever. They study you. They accuse you of cheating. They scrutinize you every day for 2,000 years, yet you're still batting 1,000. This is made even more amazing because the Bible isn't really just one book. It's a collection of 66 books written by 40 authors over the course of 1,500 years. There are books on history, philosophy, ethics, theology, among other topics, and yet there is a common thread woven through all 66 books. They all point to one perfect person. They all point to Jesus. We'll discuss that further in chapter 12, but for our purposes now, let's focus on the New Testament portion of the Bible, which details the life and teachings of Jesus. Can we really trust a book that was written over 2,000 years ago? On its face, it seems like a reasonable concern. But as I learned from Christian apologist Dr. William Lane Craig, there's an error within the question. The question assumes that we're worried about the gap in time between the events and today, as if the events happened 2,000 years ago and now we're looking at fresh evidence today. That's not the case. What we're more concerned with is the gap in time between the events and the evidence. In other words, if the New Testament writings were reliable historical evidence about Jesus' life and resurrection when they were written, they don't somehow turn into bad evidence for those events just because time has gone by since they were written. We have many reasons to believe that the New Testament writings are reliable. Consider this. The accounts were written early. As discussed in the previous chapter, the New Testament was written during the 1st century, well within the lifetimes of eyewitnesses to the events. That includes people who knew Jesus during his lifetime and those who witnessed Jesus after he rose from the dead. It also includes hostile eyewitnesses who could have refuted any of the claims if they were known to be false. There are multiple independent accounts of the events. For example, there are 4 Gospels in the New Testament that detail the life and teachings of Jesus. These were written by either eyewitnesses or those who had secondhand testimony from eyewitnesses. These 4 Gospels have gone through the most intense scrutiny imaginable and are considered to be totally reliable. There are differences between the Gospels. The differences that critics have tried to use to discredit the Gospels are actually a piece of evidence that supports their reliability. If the Gospels had been identical, it would indicate that they could have been fabricated. Rather, there are enough differences in the secondary details that indicate these are independent and consistent accounts. The writers were careful historians. For instance, Luke, the writer of approximately a quarter of the New Testament, cites 32 countries, 54 cities, and 9 islands. His geographical references have been verified as 100% accurate. That was in the case for Christ. This is particularly impressive to me, someone who uses GPS to drive to places within a half hour of where I grew up. But the point is that the supreme diligence the writers demonstrated in seemingly less important information indicates the supreme diligence they would apply to much more critical details of the accounts. Archaeology supports the accounts. The more we dig, the more support we gain for the New Testament accounts. Archaeology has even verified passages that critics initially rejected because they appeared to contradict what we knew about geography. As archaeology supports the Bible, it can be crushing to other religions. Check out chapter 5 in The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. The accounts include embarrassing details. There are details included in the New Testament writings that would never be included if they were made up. Some of these details make Jesus' closest followers look foolish, weak, and scared. For example, a made-up account of Jesus' resurrection would likely include one of Jesus' apostles discovering the empty tomb. But the New Testament tells about how the apostles deserted him and were in hiding because they feared for their lives. They didn't bravely go to the tomb. It was Mary Magdalene and a group of women who found the empty tomb. This is particularly telling given that we're talking about the first century when the testimony of women was not even considered valid in the courts of law. This is not a detail that would have been included unless it were true. Non-Christian authors wrote about Jesus. Over 10 non-Christian authors within 150 years of Jesus' life wrote about him. That's in chapter 9 from I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist if you want more information on that. Finally, the quantity of documents blows away any other document in history. So we know we're getting an accurate picture of what the documents said when they were written. Of course, with human scribes manually writing out copies, there are minor errors in the individual manuscripts. Still, we can verify exactly what the original manuscript said, what the original document said, based on the thousands of available manuscripts. Takeaway 4 is that the New Testament documents were reliable historical evidence for Jesus' life and resurrection when they were written. They don't turn into bad evidence because time has gone by since they were written. This leads us to a crossroads in our journey. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam cannot all be right about Jesus. Either Jesus is God in the flesh or he is not. C.S. Lewis famously destroyed any middle ground in his classic Mere Christianity. Here's a quote from that book. I am trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God. That is the one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would be either a lunatic on a level with the man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool. You can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open for us. He did not intend to. Now, it seems to me obvious that he was neither a lunatic nor a fiend, and consequently, however strange or terrifying or unlikely it may seem, I have to accept the view that he was and is God. Great moral teachers don't claim to be God. End quote, by the way. Back to my writing. Great moral teachers don't claim to be God. Great moral teachers don't have the authority to forgive sins, nor do they perform miracles like giving sight to the blind. A decision must be made. Takeaway number 5 is that Jesus is either a liar, a lunatic, or Lord of all. Part 3 review. I'm going to read this essay called One Solitary Life by Dr. James Allen Francis. Here's a man who was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He grew up in another village. He worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30. Then for 3 years, he was an itinerant preacher. He never owned a home. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never had a family. He never went to college. He never put his foot inside a big city. He never traveled 200 miles from the place he was born. He never did one of the things that usually accompany greatness. He had no credentials but himself. While still a young man, the tide of popular opinion turned against him. His friends ran away. One of them denied him. He was turned over to his enemies. He went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed upon a cross between two thieves. While he was dying, his executioners gambled for the only piece of property he had on earth, his coat. When he was dead, he was laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. 19 long centuries have come and gone, and today he is a centerpiece of the human race and leader of the column of progress. I am far within the mark when I say that all the armies that ever marched, all the navies that were ever built, all the parliaments that ever sat, and all the kings that ever reigned, put together, have not affected the life of man upon this earth as powerfully as that one solitary life. That's by Dr. James Allen Francis. Let's review what we know. 1. Jesus' followers claimed he appeared to them after his execution, even though they had every incentive to deny it. It is nonsensical to think that they would subject themselves to persecution, interrogation, torture, and death for something they knew to be a lie. 2. Over the course of decades of interrogation, not one of the hundreds of eyewitnesses ever recanted their testimony about Jesus rising from the dead. The resurrection is neither a conspiracy theory nor a myth. 3. The Bible, which tells us that Jesus is God in the flesh, is the most studied and scrutinized text in history, and it's not even close. 4. The New Testament documents were reliable historical evidence for Jesus' life and resurrection when they were written. They don't turn into bad evidence because time has gone by since they were written. 5. Jesus is either a liar, a lunatic, or Lord of all. Bottom line 2. Jesus Christ of Nazareth is the single most influential person in history. 2,000 plus years after being executed in the most shameful way imaginable, he is revered by followers on every continent of our planet. He is God in the flesh. The God of the Bible is the one true God.